You think the avoidant doesn't care, right? That they're sleeping fine, going out and forgetting you like you never existed? Wrong. You're about to see the truth behind the silence. Because what avoidants go through during no contact isn't what you've been told. It's not coldness. It's not apathy. It's emotional chaos, masked with a poker face. Let me be crystal clear with you. If you've ever thought no contact doesn't affect them, you're seeing the mask, not the mind. Because behind that emotional distance is someone who's fighting a war between their longing and their fear. Avoidants don't just vanish, they implode. You need to stay until the end of this speech, because once you understand what's happening behind the curtain, you'll stop blaming yourself, you'll stop chasing, and most importantly, you'll stop confusing their silence with strength. I'm going to walk you through exactly what avoidants actually experience when you go no contact. 6 stages: raw, real, messy. And if you're not ready for the truth, leave now. But if you're tired of the lies, keep listening. When an avoidant attachment style person enters no contact, the first thing they often feel is a huge wave of relief. That might be hard to hear if you're on the receiving end of the silence, crying, overthinking, replaying every word, wondering how they could just walk away so easily. But for them, the moment distance is created, the pressure that's been building inside their nervous system begins to release. See, intimacy isn't just love to an avoidant, it's threat. Closeness feels like a loss of control, a dissolving of the boundaries that keep them emotionally safe. So, when connection starts to deepen, when someone gets too close, it activates a kind of emotional claustrophobia. And the moment they step back, or you stop reaching out, they can finally breathe. Not because they don't care, but because their nervous system has been stuck in fight or flight for weeks, maybe months. That relief they feel is their body escaping a perceived threat, not their heart escaping a person. In that initial phase, they may even convince themselves they made the right decision. They'll focus on the things that felt heavy, the emotional conversations, the vulnerability, the expectations. They'll reframe the relationship in a way that makes them feel less guilty, less conflicted. It was moving too fast. I wasn't ready. They were too needy. They'll start editing the narrative, trimming away the connection, and exaggerating the discomfort. It's not malicious, it's protective, because admitting they miss you, that they needed you, that maybe they sabotaged something real, that would open a floodgate they've spent their whole lives trying to keep shut. So in the first few days or weeks of no contact, what you're seeing isn't indifference. It's psychological and emotional distance dressed up as freedom. This freedom can feel intoxicating for the avoidant. They may fill their days with distractions, work, gym, hobbies, mindless scrolling, even dating, anything that keeps them from sitting still with the discomfort that's still buried inside. They may tell themselves they're finally getting their life back, that they have space again, that they're better off. And for a while, it seems to work. The mind is incredible at numbing what the heart isn't ready to feel. They might even appear happier, more social, lighter. But what's actually happening is they're experiencing relief from pressure, not relief from love. And there's a massive difference. One is temporary, the other is transformational. But to get to transformation, they'd have to feel the grief, the fear, the vulnerability, and they're not ready to face all that. So they cling to the illusion of freedom like it's a life raft. This illusion is powerful because it gives the avoidant a sense of agency again. Emotional closeness makes them feel like they're losing control, like they're being swallowed by someone else's needs. But once no contact begins, that pressure vanishes. They're no longer required to explain themselves, show up emotionally, navigate intimacy. It's silent. It's still. And for someone wired to fear closeness, that silence feels safer than love. The irony is brutal. While you're out there feeling abandoned, they're feeling rescued, not from you, but from their own internal panic, from the fear that they'll lose themselves in another person, from the fear that if they really let someone in, They'll get hurt, manipulated, rejected, or worse, fully seen. Because deep down, many avoidants don't believe they're lovable once you get past the surface. They're terrified that if you really knew how flawed or anxious or avoidant they are, you'd leave. So they leave first, and no contact gives them the illusion that they're in control again. But here's the deeper truth they won't admit, that freedom starts to echo. At first, the silence feels like peace. Then it feels like space. But slowly, it starts to feel like emptiness. The nervous system calms down, yes, but the heart eventually wakes up. And that's when the illusion begins to crack. The relief that felt so liberating at first doesn't translate into healing, because avoidance isn't healing. It's hiding. And what's avoided doesn't go away. It festers. They've avoided conflict, avoided emotion, avoided intimacy, but they can't avoid the truth forever. And no matter how convincing their logic is, no matter how many times they tell themselves it was too much or not the right time, or better this way, the body keeps the score. The heart remembers. The absence starts to feel heavy. The quiet stops being safe and starts being suffocating. Once the initial relief begins to settle, the avoidant enters the next phase, the mental theater of self-protection. This is where they start spinning stories, not to hurt you, not even consciously to manipulate, but to survive the discomfort of emotional intimacy and the tension of missing someone while feeling terrified to return. The avoidant attachment system is wired for self-preservation. So when no contact begins and the silence grows louder, they don't just sit quietly reflecting. They rewrite, they revise history, they loop the same justifications over and over until they believe their own version of events. It wasn't that deep. They were too intense. I couldn't be myself around them. I tried, but they never saw my effort. These thoughts aren't truth. They're armor. They're cognitive escape routes that protect them from the unbearable vulnerability of admitting they pushed someone away who genuinely cared. This narrative loop becomes their shelter. It gives them a false sense of clarity, even if it's built on emotional distortion. The loop is designed to numb the parts of the relationship that touch them the most. Every time they start to remember the connection, the way you listened, the way you saw them, the moments that softened their guard, the loop kicks in. It wasn't that special. Anyone could have made me feel that. Maybe it was just infatuation. This isn't detachment. It's emotional damage control. Because if they allow those real memories to take center stage, they'd have to feel their own regret. They'd have to feel loss. And avoidants don't do loss well. They've trained themselves, often from childhood, to suppress disappointment before it has a chance to settle. And so, instead of facing it, they manipulate their internal dialogue to create emotional safety, a version of events where they didn't run, they chose better. The irony is that many avoidants are incredibly self-aware in other areas of life. They can be sharp thinkers, high performers, even insightful friends. But when it comes to emotional closeness, that self-awareness collapses under fear. They stop thinking clearly. They start projecting. They rewrite reality, not because they're emotionally immature, but because their attachment system tells them closeness equals danger. So every time their mind wanders toward, what if I messed up? The narrative loop jumps in with, no, they were the problem, or it never would have worked anyway, or they wanted too much, over and over, on repeat, until it sticks. It becomes a defense mechanism so automatic that the avoidant doesn't even realize they're doing it. They genuinely begin to believe the new story they've written, because it feels safer than admitting they're scared, sad, or still attached. And it goes even deeper. The narrative loop doesn't just rewrite the relationship, it rewrites you. They start to hyper-focus on your flaws, the times you got upset, the moments you misunderstood them. Any emotional reaction you had becomes evidence that you were too much. Any request for deeper intimacy becomes a red flag. Anytime you asked them to open up, Suddenly it gets reframed as pressure, neediness, emotional suffocation, and that version of you, it helps them justify the distance. Not because they want to villainize you, but because it's easier to make you wrong than to admit they were unavailable, emotionally avoidant, and maybe even afraid to receive the very love they secretly wanted. So they create a caricature of you, not the real you, the safe version of you, the one they can hold at arm's length and not miss. After the relief fades and the narrative loop has been playing long enough to create emotional distance, something unexpected begins to happen, something that even the avoidant isn't prepared for. This is the part they don't talk about, the part they can't control. It creeps in quietly, often when they least expect it, in the silence, in the stillness, in the space they thought they wanted. It's not a text. It's not a call. It's not even a confrontation. It's a memory, a flashback, something as simple as hearing a song, walking by a place you went together, seeing a word or phrase you used to say, and suddenly you're not just gone. You're there, in their head, in their body, in the way their chest tightens and their jaw clenches, and they try to pretend nothing's happening. But something is happening. Their brain has betrayed them. The very connection they tried to suppress has resurfaced, and it doesn't ask for permission. These flashbacks aren't casual or fleeting. They come with weight. They hit out of nowhere and stay longer than welcome. One moment they're scrolling on their phone. The next they're remembering the way you used to laugh at their dumb jokes or how you reached for their hand without even thinking. And it's not just what they remember. It's what they feel, because these memories don't just live in the mind. They live in the body. The way you made them feel safe for a second, the way your presence calmed the storm, the way despite their best efforts to push you away, you kept showing up. These moments weren't erased. They were buried, and now they're coming back up like ghosts that haven't been laid to rest. The avoidant won't tell anyone about this. They won't admit it's happening. They might not even allow themselves to linger in the memory long enough to acknowledge what it means. But it leaves a mark, a crack, a fracture in the wall they worked so hard to build, because these memories contradict the narrative they've been repeating to themselves. These flashbacks are inconvenient. They disrupt the protective story. They remind them that it wasn't all tension and pressure, that maybe, just maybe, there was something real. Something comforting, something that didn't feel like danger. And once those moments start creeping back in, it gets harder and harder to suppress the longing that lives underneath all that avoidance. But instead of leaning in, the avoidant usually doubles down. They try harder to forget. They distract more intensely. They convince themselves it's just nostalgia, just a temporary lapse. They might even feel angry at the memories, resentful that something they thought they had under control is suddenly breaking through the surface. It's a battle between their emotional defenses and their subconscious truth. And most of the time, the war leaves them confused, agitated, emotionally flooded, but still silent. Because admitting they miss you, that the connection still lives inside them, would mean acknowledging their own vulnerability. And vulnerability is the exact thing they've spent their entire lives trying to avoid. These flashbacks also carry a heavy emotional dissonance. They'll remember the way you looked at them like they mattered, and yet they're the one who walked away. They'll remember the way you showed up when they pushed you away, and now they're the ones sitting in silence. And that contradiction starts to sting, because it exposes the gap between their behavior and their desire. They wanted love, but they ran from it. They wanted connection, but they sabotaged it. And now, as the silence stretches and the memories return, they're stuck in a loop of remembering what they've lost, while still trying to convince themselves they're better off without it. What makes this phase so quietly torturous is that it's invisible. From the outside, it still looks like they're fine. They're not texting, not reaching out, not apologizing. But internally, their emotional state is anything but calm. The flashbacks pull them out of denial, even if just for a second. And in those seconds, they feel the truth. They miss the way you spoke to them, the way you saw them when they couldn't even see themselves. They remember the intimacy they were terrified of, and now they're haunted by the very closeness they rejected. It's not a conscious choice. It's the mind doing what it always does when there's unfinished emotion. It brings it back up, again and again, until it's faced, or until they run so far from it that they forget who they were when they felt it. This is the part where everything starts to turn inward, where the avoidant begins to feel a shift they didn't plan for and don't know how to handle. The mind begins to spiral, but not in the way most people expect. This isn't about longing and running back with open arms. No, this is where the war starts. Not between them and you, but between their ego and their emotion. And this war is vicious, exhausting, and silent. On one side is the part of them that still needs to feel in control. The part that believes reaching out is weakness, that silence is strength, that staying away proves they were right to leave. This is the ego's voice, and it's loud, it's defensive, it clings to pride like a shield. But on the other side, there's the emotion they can't suppress anymore. The part that misses you, the part that remembers your kindness, your presence, the comfort of your understanding, the part that wants to break the silence, just to feel close to you again, even if it's just for a second. This internal conflict isn't obvious on the outside. From your perspective, it still looks like indifference. They're still not reaching out, still not talking, still not explaining. But inside, there's a tug of war that's draining them. They'll pick up their phone, stare at your name, and freeze. They'll type out a message, read it, delete it, do it again, again. It's not because they don't want to connect. It's because the moment they think about letting their guard down, their ego kicks in with fear-based logic. What if they've moved on? What if I look pathetic? What if they don't respond? What if it just leads back to the same pain I tried to escape? And so they do nothing, not because there's nothing to say, but because they're stuck between two truths, the need to protect themselves and the need to feel love again. This battle becomes paralyzing. Ego tells them they're fine, that they made the right choice, that not contacting you is a power move, a form of strength. Emotion whispers that they're lying to themselves, that they're not okay, that maybe they overreacted, that maybe they left something good behind out of fear. These voices clash in every quiet moment. Every night they try to sleep and can't. Every time someone asks how they're doing and they force a smile that doesn't reach their eyes. The inner conflict grows more intense the longer the silence lasts, because the more time passes, the harder it becomes to take that first step back, even if every cell in their body wants to. The ego starts building walls higher than before, not because the threat is greater, but because the pain of being wrong feels unbearable. And here's what most people don't realize. For an avoidant, being wrong about you, about the relationship, about their decision to walk away, feels like an identity crisis. It's not just about swallowing pride. It's about confronting the deep-rooted belief that intimacy is dangerous, that they can't trust closeness, that distance keeps them safe. If they admit they miss you, they don't just admit they care. They shatter the entire defense system they've spent years constructing. That defense system isn't just emotional, it's survival. It's what helped them get through childhood, heartbreak, abandonment, betrayal, all the reasons they became avoidant in the first place. So this battle between ego and emotion isn't petty, it's primal. And to win it, something has to break. Sometimes it's the ego that breaks. In a rare moment of courage or desperation, they might send that message, make that call, crack the door open. Other times, it's the emotion that gets buried again, deeper this time until they convince themselves it never mattered. They might tell themselves you would have left anyway, that you were never really on their side, that you would have broken their heart, so they saved themselves by ending it first. This is ego trying to rescue them from regret, trying to twist the story so they don't have to face the feeling that maybe they walked away from something real. But even if the ego wins on the surface, the emotion doesn't die. It lingers underneath. It simmers. It waits. And in the quiet moments when no one is around, when there are no messages to ignore and no justifications left to repeat, that feeling creeps back in. Not loud, not dramatic, just present. A heaviness in the chest, a voice they can't silence anymore. This is the moment where everything converges. All the stories they told themselves, all the memories they tried to suppress, all the inner wars between ego and emotion. It leads to this, the point of no return, the edge. And what they do at this edge changes everything, not just in the relationship, but within them. This is where the avoidant either breaks or they bury it. There's rarely a middle ground. For days, weeks, even months, they've been trying to hold it together, white-knuckling their way through silence, avoiding photos, deleting messages, distracting themselves with noise, pretending they're okay. But the silence is no longer peaceful. It's heavy. The pressure builds, and their coping mechanisms start to crack. They're not sleeping like they used to. They're not laughing the same way. Something underneath is shifting, even if they won't name it. The distance they fought so hard to create is now suffocating them, and they're running out of mental scaffolding to keep it all propped up. When an avoidant gets to this point, their nervous system is overwhelmed. The emotional tension becomes physical. It shows up as restlessness, anxiety, irritability, sudden mood swings. They might lash out at others without realizing why. They might isolate more. Or in moments of quiet desperation, they circle back to your social media, replay old voice notes, reread your texts just to feel connected again. They don't do this because they've changed overnight. They do it because their system is breaking down. Their internal world has reached a boiling point, and they no longer have the emotional energy to keep pretending they're untouched. But the tragic thing is, even now, with everything rising to the surface, they still struggle to act on it, because reaching out requires something they were never taught to do: surrender. Let down the armor. Say, "I miss you." Risk being seen. That's terrifying for someone who survived their entire life by avoiding vulnerability. For some, the pain overrides the fear. They break. But it doesn't always look like a grand confession. It might be a single text at 1 a.m. Hey, or a vague emoji, a meme, a song link. Something so casual it almost doesn't register. But beneath it is the emotional equivalent of a white flag. They're not asking to pick up where you left off. They're asking, are you still safe? Is there still room for me? And even though it might look like nothing, it's taken everything in them to send it, because for an avoidant, breaking the silence isn't just about contact, it's about humiliation. The ego has to fall for the heart to speak, and when it finally does, they're more scared than they've ever been, because now there's no hiding. They've exposed the part of them they always kept locked away, the part that needs, the part that cares, the part that never wanted it to end like this. But not every avoidant chooses to break. Some bury it completely, not because they don't feel, but because they can't afford to feel anymore. The war between ego and emotion was too exhausting, the flashbacks too painful, the regret too overwhelming, so they shut the door on it for good. They convinced themselves they were never in love, that it wasn't real, that they're better off now. They throw themselves into something new. They numb it out with busyness, flings, work, anything that helps them erase the evidence of what they lost. And in the process, they lose a piece of themselves too, but they'll never say it out loud, because burying it means safety. It means control. It means they never have to admit they were afraid. And for some avoidants, fear is worse than heartbreak. So they carry on, they smile, they fake peace, they try to love other people without ever confronting the love they ran away from. The point of no return is not about whether they loved you. It's about whether they are willing to face themselves, whether they are ready to confront the mirror you held up to them. Some will, some won't. The The ones who break will come back changed, softer maybe, but uncertain. Still learning how to connect without fleeing. Still unsure if they deserve your forgiveness. The ones who bury it will pretend you never existed. But late at night, when everything goes quiet, they'll feel something they can't explain. A grief that doesn't belong to the present moment. A ghost of a bond they never processed. A sadness that leaks through the cracks of the version of themselves they fought so hard to protect.